When you slowly open your eyes, the dim light of dawn seeps through the crooked wooden slats of the small hut where you lie. The cold creeps in through every crack, forcing you to pull the thick, rough wool blanket tighter around yourself. Yet it still isn't warm enough. From far away comes the sound of a rooster crowing, blending with the movement of cattle nearby, a reminder that another long day has begun. It is the 13th century, and you live in a small village hidden among vast fields and dense forests, where human life is still bound tightly to the land and its harvests. The house you live in is small, only a single room. Its walls are made of clay mixed with straw, the roof thatched with reeds, and the kitchen smoke stains the walls black, filling the air with a pungent, earthy smell. The floor is not wood, but packed earth. You sleep on a straw mattress filled with the scent of dry grass and dampness. Around you lie your entire family, parents, brothers, sisters, even chickens, and sometimes a goat huddles inside too, since the harsh winter does not allow humans and animals to stay apart. You hear your mother rise, her footsteps soft on the earthen floor. She starts the fire, dry twigs crackling as smoke spreads throughout the room. The morning begins with the same routine, repeated daily like the breath of life. There is no luxury, no comfort, only persistence and labor to survive. Stepping outside, the icy air instantly bites your face. The morning carries the smells of mud, animal dung, and smoke rising from other huts in the village. The narrow path before your home is muddy, scattered with stones where rainwater carves ruts, and both human and animal waste is tossed aside, piling up day after day. But to you, this is normal. No one in the village thinks of the road as filthy, for they have lived with it their whole lives. For peasants, cleanliness matters far less than having food to eat, strength to work, and the will to endure the winter. Breakfast is simple, a piece of coarse rye bread, baked so hard you must soak it in a thin soup to swallow. Sometimes there is a bite of hard, salty cheese. If fortune smiles, you may drink a sip of weak beer, the everyday drink of the village, even for children, since well water is often cloudy and unsafe. After the brief meal, work begins at once. You go with your father to the fields. The tools are crude, a wooden plough with a dull iron blade dragged by a weary ox or horse. The soil is heavy, full of stones, and you bend your back all day sowing seeds, pulling weeds, or reaping grain, depending on the season. It is endless work, for the earth is your only source of life. Without crops there is no food. Without food, the family will starve. Day follows day, labor follows labor, and life drifts forward. For you it is more than work, it is endurance. Your back aches, your hands are calloused, your feet caked with mud. Rain means working soaked to the skin. Sun means burning flesh. There is no choice but to keep going. Your small village rests beside a stream. It is water to drink, a place to wash clothes, and a playground for children. But it also receives everything the village discards: waste, refuse, animal carcasses. Illness is common. Fevers and coughs strike often, and death can arrive suddenly without reason or cure. At midday, the village pauses. People sit in the shade, eat more bread, and drink watery beer. No luxuries, no delicacies. Life is the repetition of rough meals and heavy work. Children are no exception. From a young age they herd sheep, gather firewood, or watch their younger siblings. Play is rare, made of simple games, kicking a ball of rags or tossing stones. Childhood quickly dissolves into duty by afternoon. Work resumes until sunset. As darkness falls, the village grows quiet, broken only by barking dogs, chirping insects, and wind sighing through thatched roofs. Dinner is little better than breakfast, a pot of thin vegetable soup, a hard crust of bread, perhaps a bit of salted meat, saved from the past season. After supper, the family gathers around the fire. There are no lamps, no books. Stories are the only entertainment, tales of dragons lurking in deep woods, of saints who protect, of knights who battle against the shadows. Children listen wide-eyed, while outside the night envelops the village. Slowly, you drift to sleep on the itchy straw mattress, surrounded by the snores of your parents, the rustle of animals in the corner, and the lingering smell of smoke. Tomorrow will be the same as today, and today the same as yesterday. This endless cycle is the life of a medieval peasant. Night in a medieval village was never truly peaceful. When the moon rose, the darkness concealed the primal fears that the villagers carried within them. The distant howl of wolves from the forest, the hoot of an owl on the roof, or even just the rustling of the wind was enough to make children press close to their mothers, whispering hurried prayers. Adults sometimes said that wandering spirits of the wrongly dead roamed the night, seeking shelter around the village. No one dared to claim it was true, but everyone believed it. And that belief itself made the night heavier, darker, more suffocating. In the flickering firelight, the deep lines on your parents' faces became clear. Harsh living had worn them down quickly. A person in their 30s might already look 50. Illness, poverty, and endless labor cut short the lives of most villagers. To live to 40 was considered fortunate, and reaching 50 was rare. The few elderly were honored, for they were proof of survival through countless hardships. You curl into the coarse wool blanket, listening to faint whispers carried by the wind. It smells of hay, mud, and smoke. The fire cracks softly, a steady rhythm lulling the house into slumber. And as always, sleep takes hold, brief but deep, for a body worn by labor demands rest to endure another day. Morning comes again. You wake once more on the itchy straw mattress. The sun barely rises, mist still cloaks the fields. The damp chill turns your breath into pale white clouds. You hastily pull on a woolen tunic, slip your feet into heavy wooden shoes and step outside. The village path is always muddy, but the early hours are particularly quiet. Only a few women draw water at the well, exchange short words, then hurry away. Here conversation is sparse. Time belongs to work, not chatter. You follow your father into the fields, sickle in hand, ready for a day of harvest. The barley is golden and ripe, yet reaping is exhausting labor, lasting hours beneath the blazing sun. Your hands soon ache, your back stiffens, but no one can stop. The whole village must work together, for if the grain is not brought in on time, the rains will ruin everything. While working, whispers spread from mouth to mouth. Someone says that in a nearby village a strange sickness has appeared. The afflicted burn with fever, swell with great lumps, and die within days. The tale spreads quickly, planting unease in every heart. No one knows its cause, no one knows its cure. Some say it is God's punishment, others whisper of demons. But whatever the truth, the harvest cannot wait. Fear will not fill the granary, nor turn grain into bread. And so everyone pushes aside their dread and bends again to their work. At noon, the sun is high, and hunger gnaws at your belly. You rest in the shade, chewing a hard crust of bread with a bit of salty cheese. The brine stings your mouth, but gratitude fills you. At least today there is something to eat. On other days, lunch may be nothing but water and thin porridge. In the distance, mounted soldiers ride past. Their armor gleams, spears in hand, proud and imposing. The whole village pauses to watch. To peasants, soldiers, and knights seem like figures from another world. They are men of power, both protectors and oppressors. When the Lord commands, they collect taxes or seize grain to fuel wars the villagers cannot comprehend. As the afternoon drags on, work feels endless. Your hands bleed, but you keep reaping. The stalks pile high, bundled and hauled by ox carts back to the village. When the sun sinks, your body is drained, yet there is still supper to prepare. Your mother drops a handful of barley into the pot, adds a few turnips, and boils a thin soup. The family gathers around the hearth, sharing spoonfuls. Each mouthful of hot broth spreads warmth, warding off the cold seeping through the thatched roof. Children eat hungrily while the adults sit in silence. Few words are spoken, for tomorrow will mirror today, and no one expects anything different. Tonight, just as the family drifts into sleep, a sudden summer storm strikes. Thunder rumbles and heavy rain lashes against the thatched roof. The wind shakes the wooden door, forcing rainwater through every crack. You curl under the wool blanket, heart pounding. Outside, livestock cry out in panic. Dogs bark relentlessly. Your father jumps up to brace the door against the storm, while your mother gathers the children near the hearth, whispering prayers of comfort. In these times, every storm carries fear. It can destroy crops, tear down roots, and leave the village facing hunger. People believe storms are signs of God's wrath. Each flash of lightning ripping through the sky drives them to cross themselves, pleading for forgiveness. After a long night, the rain slowly fades, leaving only the drip of water from the thatch. By morning you step outside to find fields churned into mud. Some bundles of half-harvested grain have washed away. Fences lie broken, but at least the house still stands. The villagers immediately begin cleaning and repairing. Life allows no pause. That day, a funeral is held. An old man, sick for weeks, has finally passed. The entire village gathers, carrying the rough wooden coffin to the churchyard. The priest intones prayers in Latin, a language none but he understands. Yet everyone listens in reverence. The church bell tolls, announcing that another soul has departed this world. Death is no stranger. No one despairs, for all have witnessed it many times. Infants die young, youth fall ill, adults collapse from toil. Death is as natural as rain or winter. It is accepted, woven into life itself. After the service, you and other children chase each other in the churchyard, laughing for a brief moment before being called back to work. Such fleeting joys all a child can have. No fine toys, no books, only imagination and simple games. Yet laughter, echoing through the air, is enough to lighten the village's gloom. In the afternoon, you follow your father to the forest for firewood. The woods are feared, said to be home to witches, goblins, and strange creatures. Still, wood is vital for heat and cooking, and so people must risk it. Leaves rustle, birds call, branches snap underfoot, a scene both mysterious and unsettling. You haul a heavy bundle on your shoulders, sweat soaking your tunic despite the cool air. By the time you return, dusk paints the village in pale gold. Smoke curls from thatched roofs, and for a moment the village looks calm, timeless. That evening, your mother prepares another pot of vegetable soup. This time she adds herbs she believes will ward off sickness. As the family eats, she tells a tale of a saint who once healed an entire village through miracles. Such stories are both faith and comfort, anchors against harsh reality. You listen, eyelids growing heavy. Outside, the moon climbs high, shining on muddy paths. Tomorrow will be the same again. Toil, meager meals, fear and hope woven together. The cycle of life continues, unbroken. As night deepens, the village falls into silence. No lamps, no carriages, only insects chirping and dogs barking far away. The last candle is blown out, plunging the house into total darkness. In the Middle Ages, the night seems longer, deeper, and more terrifying. People believe demons wander freely after sunset, and only prayer can protect them. In restless sleep, you wake often at strange noises, a branch snapping, a mouse scurrying, each sound making you shiver. Even adults cannot shake fear of the dark. Your mother hangs a wooden crucifix over the door, hoping to ward off evil. Faith does not brighten the moon, but it gives weary hearts the courage to rest. At dawn, roosters crow, pulling the village back into its endless rhythm. Your father hands you an old wooden hoe. The fields await, and no one can escape duty. Mist lingers on the path, the damp air biting your skin. Today's work is clearing weeds and tending grain roots. The soil is hard, the hoe heavy, yet you do not complain. Around you, peasants bend low, sweat dripping into the dirt. The crack of hoes, the grunts of labor merge into the season's song. At midday, villagers rest briefly. A crust of bread, a wedge of cheese, an onion. Such is the common meal of peasants. You chew slowly, drink from a leather flask, and return to work. There is no room for idleness. Those who do not work will starve, and hunger is the fiercest enemy. Later, the priest passes through the fields, reminding all of the upcoming feast day. The church is the village's heart, both sanctuary and law. The priest's authority is great, sometimes even greater than the Lord's. People bow their heads, obedient, as though hearing the voice of God. By sunset, your body is exhausted, yet duties remain, feeding animals, drawing water from the well, tending the fire. You stagger beneath the weight of the water bucket, arms trembling. But the sight of family gathered around the hearth warms you. Dinner is thin soup once again, but this night your mother spares a pinch of salt and a scrap of old smoked meat. The family eats slowly, savoring the rare taste of fat and salt. For the poor, a morsel of meat is treasure, a small blessing. Afterward, neighbors arrive. They bring a crude string instrument and sing old folk songs. Children dance, adults clap in rhythm. For a moment, hardship dissolves. Music becomes medicine for the soul. Night returns. You lie again on straw, body weary, but mind carried by the songs you heard. Outside, the wind brushes the thatch, an owl hoots, but this time sleep comes easier. Tomorrow the cycle begins anew, unbroken and unending. Medieval peasants have no notion of leisure or freedom. They live by the seasons, the soil, the will of God and their Lord. It is a life of hardship, but also of quiet resilience. Early the next morning, when the first rays of sunlight had just risen over the distant hills, the church bells rang again, waking everyone up. That sound was so familiar it felt like part of the village's heartbeat, echoing steadily to mark the passage of time, reminding all that a new day had begun. You opened your eyes, your body heavy from yesterday's labor, but no one had the right to lie down any longer. Your father stepped outside in his worn wooden shoes, his calloused hands holding a dulled sickle. He silently looked at the field still covered in mist, as if foretelling the long day of work ahead. Your mother lit the fire, smoke rising thick and stinging her red eyes, made sore both from the smoke and from lack of sleep. Your younger sibling cried out for milk, the wail louder than the rooster's crow. Breakfast was simple. A piece of hard bread from the day before, soaked in warm water to soften, with a little dried vegetable. You ate slowly, each crumb breaking in your mouth, swallowing without much sense of taste. But for medieval peasants, simply filling the stomach before going to the field was already a blessing. The village gradually grew lively. Some carried water from the well, some prepared ploughs and tools, others led cattle to the pasture. Children were also assigned tasks. Some gathered firewood, others watched over the poultry. No one was idle. In such a society, even the youngest were an essential part of the labor force. You followed your father to the field, stepping through muddy puddles left from the earlier rain. The ground was soft and wet, your feet sinking deep, yet no one complained. Today's work was repairing the wooden fences around the field, because livestock from the neighboring village could wander in and destroy the crops. Your father hammered each plank into place, sweat already soaking his shirt. Meanwhile, in the distance, you saw the Lord's men riding by. Their armor gleamed under the sunlight, so different from the ragged bodies of peasants. The pounding of hooves made many stop work and bow their heads. The gulf between classes was clear in every moment of life. Peasants could only obey, for their survival depended entirely on the land granted by the Lord. By noon, the church bells rang again to signal rest. You sat under the shade of a tree, took out a small piece of aged yellow cheese, and shared it with your father. Both of you ate in silence, accompanied only by the sound of wind and birds. At times that silence was more precious than words. In the afternoon, work seemed endless. People took turns pulling the plough, raising furrows, weeding, hands blistered, covered in soil. Each strike of the hoe drained away a portion of strength, but the work had to go on because there was no other choice. Otherwise, hunger would come faster than any fear. Returning home at night, you were so tired, you hardly wanted to eat. Your mother placed before you a bowl of thin soup with a few pieces of vegetable and some grains. You ate spoon by spoon, saving a little for your sibling. Sharing was not optional, because food was always scarcer than mouths to feed. After dinner, your father told you tales of warriors who had fought in faraway battles, of knights clad in shining armor riding mighty horses. To you that world was distant, like a dream you could never touch. You only knew that tomorrow would be the same as today, digging, carrying water, trapped in an endless cycle. When you closed your eyes, the barking of dogs in the distance and the hoot of owls blended into the familiar night symphony. Sleep came quickly, not from peace, but from sheer exhaustion. Night fell again, and another medieval day ended like so many others. The next morning, the stifling air foretold a long, weary day. You were awakened by your father's call, his hands already holding the old sickle. On the table, your mother had managed only a few dry crumbs of bread, enough for everyone to chew hastily before heading to the field. The dim light of dawn did nothing to ease the fatigue, but no one had the right to refuse work. The field was more crowded than usual. Everyone was rushing to harvest part of the barley before the rain came. The heavy heads of grain bent low, but the dark clouds looming in the distance made all uneasy. Sickles sliced swiftly, the cuts sharp but hurried. Children were ordered to watch the skies and sound the alarm if the storm approached sooner than expected. You worked until your back ached, your hands burning raw against the wooden handle. Sweat poured down, mixing with dust and clinging to your face. Each bundle of barley was tied tight and piled up. Your father labored silently, saying nothing, as if words would only waste strength. By midday, a large cloud covered the sun, and darkness fell. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The whole village rushed to carry the last bundles to storage. People ran, wooden shoes sinking in the mud, clothes drenched in sweat and rain. When the first drops fell, everyone sighed with relief. At least the harvest was safe for now. In that moment, you felt the fragility of life. A single storm could decide whether there would be food for the winter. Peasants lived under constant fear. and joy was nothing more than the brief escape from hunger. That afternoon, as rain poured heavily, your family gathered in the dim hut. Your mother brought out a pot of vegetable soup, adding a little freshly ground grain. The faint aroma filled the air, easing both the chill and the weariness. You ate spoonful by spoonful, warmth spreading through your stomach. Outside, the sound of rain emphasized the fragile safety your family held on to. When the storm cleared, a group of traveling musicians arrived in the village. They carried old lutes and small drums and began performing in the churchyard. Villagers gathered, forgetting their exhaustion for a while. Music rang out lively, children danced, adults clapped along. Such moments became rare memories, giving them strength to keep enduring. As night fell, the priest held a short prayer. He spoke of God's trials, saying the storm was merely a test of faith. Everyone recited the prayers together, even if few understood the Latin words. That faith, however faint, was the flame that kept them standing amid hardship. You returned home, lay on the straw, listening to frogs croaking in the fields. Sleep came later than usual, thunder still echoing far away. Yet, as your eyes slowly closed, you felt yourself drifting into a state both fearful and safe, a paradox ever present in medieval life. The next morning the bells rang again, reminding everyone to return to the endless cycle. No day was truly different, yet the body still felt heavier. You got up, your hands still aching from the day before, but work never waited. Your mother had prepared a little thin porridge from the leftover oats, a meal light on the stomach but low in energy. The whole family ate in silence, like a wordless ritual before stepping into the new day. Today's task was to dig out the drainage ditches around the fields. After the heavy rain, the water had gathered, and if it was not led away in time, the rice roots would rot. You gripped the wooden shovel, sinking deep into the wet soil. Your feet slipped constantly, mud splashing onto your face, but you did not stop. Beside you, your father bent low, his broad shoulders trembling with each stroke of the shovel. He no longer seemed able to distinguish fatigue, only perseverance remained, like an instinct for survival. In the distance, a few villagers were driving the cattle back to the pen. The sound of lowing, the shouts of children echoed across the fields. One cow slipped in the mud, and the whole group had to pull it up. In the chaos, no one could remain calm, but everyone knew that each animal was priceless. Losing a cow meant losing the plow's strength, losing milk, and losing the future of the crops. By noon, drizzle began to fall again. Everyone paused, huddling under a temporary straw shelter. You bit into a piece of hard bread, chewing endlessly before swallowing. The sour taste of mouldy flour lingered, but no one dared throw it away. Food was far too precious, even when it was dry and flavorless. In the afternoon, the work turned to tidying the storage barn. Sacks of grain were stacked, carefully checked to prevent damp and rot. The musty smell of dried grain mixed with straw and wood, making the air stifling. You swept the dust, sneezing again and again, but kept working. Your father counted each sack, memorizing the meager number. All hopes rested on that supply to survive the coming winter. In the evening, dinner was once more vegetables and thin soup. But tonight your mother had a little dried fish, gifted by a neighbor after a trip to the river. She tore it into small pieces and dropped it into the pot. The salty aroma spread, making the whole family feel as though they were feasting on a lavish banquet. That joy was small, yet priceless. When the village sank into darkness, the priest stepped out of the church, raising the cross high and praying for protection. Moonlight fell across his face, creating a scene both sacred and somber. The villagers quietly made the sign of the cross, then returned home. You watched, your heart stirred with both reverence and unease. Faith was the only thread binding people to this uncertain world. That night you dreamed of a golden field that never ran empty. Birds sang, the wind blew gently, and you no longer felt hunger. But when you woke, there was only the crowing of roosters and the grey dim light of dawn. Reality pulled you back to hard labor and meager meals. The new day began with a gloomy sky. Thick clouds hid the sunlight, leaving a heavy feeling. You stepped out of the house, your feet sinking into the soggy mud from the many days of rain. The damp air carried the smell of earth, rotting straw, and livestock. Your father said nothing, only signaled you to hurry, for today the leaky roof had to be repaired. The thatched roof was torn in many places. Streams of water dripping down all night had soaked the straw bedding. You climbed onto the roof, holding a bundle of fresh, dry straw, stuffing it into the holes. The wind blew hard, each gust howling and making you stagger. Your hands trembled, but you knew if you didn't do it, the house would soon rot away. Your mother stood on the ground, handing up more straw and tying it tightly with hemp rope. The whole family worked together, and gradually the roof became secure again. When the work was finished, you slumped down, your clothes drenched in sweat. But before you could rest, your father called you out to the fields. The sky was heavy with clouds, but the work could not wait. Weeds had sprung up quickly after the rain, creeping among the rows of rice. You bent down to pull each clump, your back hunching, your hands caked with mud. From time to time, you looked up at the sky, silently wishing the rain would not fall again. While working, you heard the laughter of children from afar. A few too young to labor were allowed to play near the river bank. They threw stones into the water, shouting joyfully. That laughter sounded out of place in the heavy air, yet it brought a sliver of light to the bleak day. You wished you could be carefree like them, but then bent down again to continue working. At noon, the whole village gathered in the churchyard. Today was the day the Lord collected taxes. Villagers one by one brought sacks of rice, baskets of vegetables, a few chickens, or other meagre valuables. You stood beside your father, clutching a small sack of rice, watching the long line of people waiting. The Lord sat on his horse, cloaked in thick fabric, his eyes cold. A soldier beside him recorded each offering, the goods piling up into a great heap. Your father handed over the sack of rice, bowing very low. You felt resentment but dared not speak. Everyone knew that resistance only brought the whip. The people bowed, while the Lord and his retinue departed with their spoils. Only when the sound of hooves faded did the village breathe again, then silently return to work. As evening fell, you went with your mother to fetch water. The well lay in the center of the village where many gathered, each carrying wooden buckets or leather flasks. Murmurs of conversation filled the air, mixed with the creaking sound of the rope pulling water. People exchanged news. A family in the next village was ill. A man sent to war had not returned. The coming winter would be harsher. The news was scarce, but everyone listened closely. Bringing the water home, you saw your father sharpening the dull sickle. The firelight flickered across his sun-darkened face, his eyes thoughtful. He said that tomorrow they must harvest part of the rice early before the autumn storm arrived. You nodded, feeling his silent worry. That night's dinner was simple as usual, vegetable soup and a bit of bread. But your mother told an old tale of a saint who once passed through these lands and blessed the fields so the rice grew tall and plentiful. The children listened in rapture, their eyes bright in the dark. You too felt lighter, as though that faith could truly protect. Night fell, and you lay listening to the wind whistling through the cracks. Sleep came fitfully, mixed with dreams and reality. In your dream, you wandered lost in a dark forest, pale moonlight filtering through, the sound of beasts lurking close. You ran endlessly but never escaped, until the sound of church bells rang out, pulling you back to reality. The next morning, the air was colder than usual. Your breath rose like smoke, a sign that winter was near. You wrapped yourself in a thin wool garment and followed your father to the fields. Today was the rice harvest. The whole village gathered strength, each swing of the sickle steady. Golden sheaves piled high, their fragrance spreading across the fields. Laughter mingled with the sound of the sickles, one of the rare times when hard labor became joy. Yet the joy did not last. A child in the village suddenly collapsed, his face pale, his breath faint. His mother wailed. People hurried to carry him away. The priest rushed over, made the holy sign, prayed, but there was no medicine or cure. Death always lurked, even on the days that seemed the brightest. As the sun set, you looked at the gathered sheaves, feeling both joy and unease. The harvest was successful, but the winter ahead remained uncertain. That night, the whole village held a small feast to celebrate. They brought homemade wine, fresh bread, and sang songs. In the flickering firelight, every face glowed, briefly forgetting their worries. You sat beside your parents, feeling the warmth from the fire, from the laughter, from that rare happiness. But deep inside you knew that tomorrow the harsh cycle would continue. The next morning the sky was unexpectedly clear and blue, as if the long stormy night had never existed. Sunlight slipped through the leaves, falling onto the mist-covered fields. You went out with your father, continuing to gather the sheaves left over from the day before. The air was pleasant, the faint smell of earth after rain lingering, yet your hands still trembled from the cold. The sound of sickles cutting rice echoed across the fields. One person followed another, row after row of stalks falling. Shouts and calls rang out, the rhythm urgent. The villagers knew that even one day's delay meant a greater risk of losing the crop. Each grain of rice was like a fragment of life tied to the hope of surviving the winter. By noon, everyone rested under a large tree near the fields. A pot of thin porridge was shared, each person scooping a little. You held your wooden bowl, staring at the cloudy liquid with only a few grains of rice floating. Yet you ate eagerly, the morning's hunger pressing heavily. Murmured conversations spread. Some spoke of the harvest, others of distant news. An old man told of hearing that war was spreading in another region, many young men being taken as soldiers. The group fell silent, eyes anxious. No one wished to leave the village, yet no one could be sure of tomorrow. You looked at your father, his brow furrowed, his calloused hands gripping the bowl tightly. He said nothing, but worry was written on his face. As afternoon came, you and the village youths were tasked with carrying the sheaves to the granary. The granary stood beside the church, built of thick wood, tightly locked. Load by load the stacks grew higher. Sweat poured down, shoulders ached, yet no one complained. Everyone knew the granary was life itself for the village through the snowbound months. As dusk fell, the church bells rang. The priest gathered the people, offering words of thanksgiving. Latin prayers rose into the twilight, incomprehensible yet solemn. The villagers knelt, eyes fixed on the wooden cross. For a moment the weariness seemed to vanish, leaving only a fragile faith. That evening you sat by the fire with your family. Your mother brought out a few dried onions, adding them to the pot of soup. The sharp, warm aroma spread, comforting everyone. Your father told of years past when crops failed, and the whole village had to eat tree bark to survive. You shuddered, silently hoping this year would not be the same. That night the wind howled through the cracks, carrying the first chill of the season. You curled up on the straw, pulling the rough blanket close. In the dark, the rustling of mice, the distant howls of dogs, all reminded you that danger was always near. Sleep came slowly, filled with hazy dreams. The next day, the work continued. The fields grew bare, only yellow stubble left. The villagers turned to other tasks, drying rice, pounding grain, preparing firewood. You and the youths went to the forest to cut dry trees. The sharp blows of axes rang out. Trees crashed down with a rumble that shook the ground. The work was heavy, but all knew that without firewood, winter would kill them. In the forest, the light was dim, the air cold and damp. Strange bird cries echoed. Sometimes a growl sounded far away. Everyone gripped their axes tightly, watching carefully. The woods always held dangers, wild beasts, bandits, or the mysteries the elders spoke of. At last, the group gathered a great pile of wood, loading it onto a cart to bring back. By evening, as the cart rolled along the muddy path, children ran after it, cheering. They laughed, picking up broken twigs to play. The adults breathed easier, knowing at least there would be fire to keep them warm this winter. In that small joy, you saw your mother's eyes light up, and your father's rare smile. That night, the whole village gathered for songs. They sat around a great fire, the lute strumming old melodies. The singing was plain, unpolished, but filled with sincerity. Children danced, elders clapped to the rhythm, youths sang loudly. For a while the village forgot its fears, bound together in warmth. You sat there, feeling the heat spread, your eyes blurring. In that moment you understood that joy here was simple: fire, bread, family, and neighbors together. And you knew that this life, no matter how harsh, would continue to turn. The next morning, the village rose earlier than usual. The rooster's crow echoed, mingled with barking dogs and the small bell from the church. You and your parents ate a few bites of hard bread before heading out. Today was the day to ready the stores of wood and grain against the winter. You and the young men stacked wood in tall piles, carefully placed against the walls. Each log was set firmly so it would not topple, layers built like a fortress. Sweat streamed, your hands blistered, yet all pressed on. Your father watched nearby, inspecting each pile with stern eyes. He knew well if the wood got wet or collapsed, the family would freeze. Meanwhile, the women busied themselves with drying and pounding the rice. The wooden mortars thudded endlessly. Your mother and others worked in rhythm, each strike scattering grain, dust filling the air. Children picked up fallen grains, laughing, sometimes squabbling. The noise was loud, but it was life itself. At noon, everyone rested under the trees. You sat with your peers, talking of faraway dreams. One wished to see the great city with its castles and bustling markets. Another longed for real leather shoes, not heavy wooden clogs. You stayed silent, wishing only for enough food this winter. A simple dream, yet harder than any other. In the afternoon, a group of strangers arrived. They were merchants bringing cloth, salt, and a few luxuries. Villagers gathered curiously. Brightly colored fabrics made children stare wide-eyed. Women whispered desires, but few had coin to buy. They only watched, longing and bitter. Your father pulled you away, whispering, "Do not let desire bring more suffering." At sunset, the villagers gathered again in the churchyard. The priest offered thanks for the harvest. Candlelight flickered on weary yet contented faces. Hymns rose mingling with the wind. You knelt, feeling the cold earth torn between peace and unease. That night, your family sat around the hearth. The fire glowed, lighting the small home. Your mother told of past winters, heavy snow blocking the roads, villagers sharing crumbs of bread. Some years they even boiled leather to survive. You shivered, knowing the trial had not yet begun. Your father was silent, eyes fixed on the flames as if bracing himself. Late at night, the wind howled louder, branches clattering. You curled under the rough blanket, barely warm. In the dark, you thought of tomorrow, of the coming winter, of the fragility of life. At last, weariness drew you into sleep. The next morning, work went on as endlessly as the cycle itself. Villagers gathered more wood, patched the walls, checked the thatched roofs. Everything had to be secure before the snow. You and your father climbed to the roof, laying another thick layer of straw. Your hands burned, your knees numb, but you clenched your teeth and worked. Below, your mother patched old clothes, each stitch clumsy but patient. By afternoon, cold winds swept in. Villagers hunched in rough cloth, hurrying to finish. The sky turned grey. Flocks of birds flew south. No one spoke, but all knew. Winter had truly come. That night, the first snow fell. White flakes drifted through the air, covering roofs, yards, and the bare fields. You stood at the doorway, gazing at the strange sight. It was beautiful, yet the cold pierced to the bone, making you shiver. Your father shut the door tight, feeding more wood into the fire. The family huddled by the hearth, silent, watching the snow fall. In that moment, you understood. Every effort, every drop of sweat from the past days had been only to prepare for this. The harsh winter had begun, and the life of the village now depended on what they had stored. Ngai jiao tian kwa mua jong, ka lang thug day trong kantuet fu trang soa. Bao troi sam chi an sang mun hatten hubi nuot chung. Ban buokra kua, hoito lab tu kwa thang kui trang. Jui chan run ray trong jui giai go nang ni, lan but tau swang. Moi thu imang jen la thuong. Chico tiengio, rit quan hung he qua va tieng tu yet rui lop bab tren mai tran. Cha ban hom laingo lua tu jem qua tem vai kut kwe. Ngon lua bab bung soi sang hon mat met moi kuaong. Mi panjat noi sup no lin bep. Chi ko vai ku kai ko vai tat lua. Mui tom nat hoalan toa chang juji sheji kam giat joy. Ban kam bat hoop tung thea nong hoi. Long vua am len vua lo lang. So luong tu kia liu ko ju sho suot mua chung dai dang dak. Ben yoi ting shuang hatho bang len goi moing goi jen kaun guyen. Dan lang luk tu keo nao ra quan sha trong hung tamao vai dai. Tu yet ngab jen mat ta chan, buot ji nang ne. Ben trong ha to. Ach nen labloi shiu sang hong jian am lange. Lin mut jok kin bang giong tram buon. Kau sin chua chi chu. Angoi den krigoi, joy mat naham gien. Trong long kan kau cho mua jong nai kong kwa kat hiet. Nong kau nguyen kong dehen kan juok joy ret. Nehiu gia jin ja fai kat giam kau fan ge tu tuan jiao. Ban hin vau kulua dai nung bao hati toi. Chame ban bag no tieng. Putin toan sao chu moi ngai van kong chut ge ji an. Bua an tro nen jong gian jen muk chi la mot bat chao luang. Joy ki them mot ku han ko. Tre kong ge rock. Mat tam quang vi joy. Ngi lon thi lang le chiu jung. Hong dam dan tho. Gai troi qua cham chap. Kong viek duin hat la gu lua trong bep. Va lai quan au. Va joy kira angwai lai them kui. Moilam bokra julan nudok et vauda. Ban te kum. Joy moi nut ne. Mui jung. Ban fai kan rang. Keo sekui qua tuyet. Dai. Trong ki hui togap gap. Chaji chan. Dang gui kum suong. Tung bok nang ne. Nheng kong the dung lai. Kong to kring hia la chet kong. Mot ngai no. Coating shao lang kaplang. Gia jing o jiao dok ma ji jua kun ho bi sot kao. Kong ko thok. Kong ko kach ku. Jua bei chi yudan roi lim ji. Ting hok tan bang wong trong jem. Ching ka lang chim trong im lang. Banam chat chan. Team jap don. Kam nan ro rang su mong man kwa kip ngoi. Thoi gien troi. Bang tu yet jen. Gio gao tet. Quang tung tung mang tu yet trang. Mai naha rung ban bad. Kan kwa keo kut ke. Kan a ban goi sat ben bep kwai kwan trong hoi among men. Mi lei ban. Chathi chatem kui. Mo hoi u jam dun guai troi lang tauk swang. Tieng bong riten hu tieng thu du. Am an tung ngoi. Sao kong bao. Lang hieran hu mot bai huang. Tu yet ngap qua jiao goi. Ki koi gai jo. Chongia suit bi sao. Hiu konga kondebi chon vue. Chi kong vai kombo run rai trong gok. And goi dan voi vang jiao boy. Koku voten hungi consort lai. Bantung chakshutung luptuyet taitekung daramau. Kitim de mod konde kon song. Moing goi reo len hu tim de vang. Hung mat kwan hiu. Jesu chen giala suabatit si kan him. Mua jong moi chibat jao, hung noi lo ja fuking kap noi. Moin goi jiu langle, joy madhot hat an hin med moi. Nung kuok tro chuyen. Ngay kang thwa thot. They vow ju la tieng thodai jem jen. Trong kan na twai. Ben namen he tieng giong guai kia. Mine ha rung rin. Tuong go kiu rang rak. Ban keo chan len tan jiao. Nuhung kei lan van luon vao tung ke. Trong mo mang. Ban he tieng chuong ha tho vong lai. Cham rani va tram juk. Nu luin hak rang juk. Tin la thu duin hat con gu. Moing goi jung vung. Sang hom sao. Ban kung chara gieng. Nog jan jong bang tren mat fai dung bua japwu. Tung man bang bang ra lang bot. Ban tho gauk swong. Keo len tung thung ho. Joy te nut ne. Mau ri ra. Nhang hong e than pien. No klasu song. Va du jiao jon jen jiao. Van fai lam. Trong hung ngai jo. Kao chuyen ko va loi hat. Tro than niem an wi. Me ban thong ke chuyen tang. Chati hat nung bai kak shua. Tre kon langen he joy mat lap lang. Trong an lua. Tu bung joy kon kao. Chung van koi king ke chuyen. Ban hing kan hai. Long vua jiao vua am. Hiu rang joy kiniem tin moi la tu gyupeng goi te song sod. Then hung mua jong van dai le the. Moi ngai troi quan hu mot tran chien. Jem dai votan ngai chile loy an sang mon hat. Tu kan dan kui voiji. Moin goi song trong su cho joy kang tang. Phong biet ngai mes mang jengi roi mod boy sang. Mat troi he rang hom thuong le. Bao troi trong shang. Tieng chim la vang vong. Tu yet ba jiao tan. Tung giot nuot nuk suong mai trans. Goi dan wara. Ito hong ki moi. Ai nei jo mim tuoi du kiet sut. Mua jong ja kwa. Mua xuan jang jen gan. Ban jung yua sang. Hin tuyet. Kan che than dong. Sam tain hu jok hoi sin. Du biet rang hu kan van kon, ban van thai motia hi vong. Boy sao tat ka, ban va gia jing, van song. Sot qua mua jong, crackling yet. The snow slowly melted, revealing patches of dark brown earth, speckled with tender green sprouts. After months of bitter cold, the sky was now clearer, sunlight spilling down like a gift. You stepped into the yard, your feet sinking into the mud, yet your heart felt strangely light. Birds sang from bare branches, heralding that spring had truly returned. Your father stood by the field, his eyes fixed on the soil. He scooped up a handful of dirt, squeezed it, then nodded. "The land is still good," he murmured. "We can sow again?" Hearing this, your mother's face brightened. Though winter had taken food, livestock, and even lives, spring offered a chance to begin anew. The whole village gathered to plan the planting. Each family brought the last of their seeds, treasuring them like jewels. Some had barley, others a few dried beans, and some carefully saved mustard seeds. All were shared and exchanged, so every plot of land had something to plant. No one held back, for all knew that if one household failed, the whole village would suffer. On the first day of sowing, the sky was clear, the breeze gentle. You gripped a hoe, your hands trembling but resolute. Your father ploughed furrows while you and your mother dropped seeds and covered them with earth. The sound of hoes and shovels rang steadily, like music of life. Children scampered about pulling weeds, laughing as they worked. The air was no longer heavy with despair. Hope thrived here. By day's end your body ached, your clothes smeared with mud, but your spirit soared. That evening the family shared a thin vegetable soup, yet it was no longer a meal of desperation, but one of faith in tomorrow. Your father even smiled. Your mother softly sang an old lullaby. In the glow of the fire you felt reborn. In the days that followed, the village brimmed with energy. Men mended fences, women patched clothes, children carried small tasks. No one complained anymore. When the first shoots pushed through the soil, the village seemed to shine. You bent down, touching the tender green, as if holding new life in your hands. Spring also brought celebration. Though food was scarce, the villagers held a small feast. They roasted the last bit of meat, baked barley bread, and poured thin ale. Children sang, adults danced in circles around the fire. The priest gave words of thanks, and voices rose in song across the fields. In that moment, winter's grief seemed far away. You sat by the fire, watching faces lit with laughter, your heart swelling. Memories of cold nights and mourning returned. But so did gratitude. You were still here, with family and neighbors. The flames reflected in your parents' gentle smiles, and you silently vowed to keep living, to reap more in seasons to come. Time passed, and more seedlings rose, fields now lush and green. Bees hummed, birds sang, the wind rustled leaves in harmony with spring's song. Walking the fields with your father, pride swelled in your chest at the sight of life reborn. He placed a hand on your shoulder, his eyes full of faith. Our future lies here. Though hardships were not over, spring had given strength. The whole village moved forward together, trusting in the harvest ahead. Life turned once more, and after the cruel winter, all new. As long as breath remained, as long as earth awaited seed, as long as they had each other, renewal would always come. The short days of spring passed, fields glowing green, children laughing barefoot across the meadows, and everyone believed that after the cruel winter, a season of warmth and plenty had truly arrived. But life in the Middle Ages never allowed people to rest in peace for long. Just as hope began to kindle, new trials gathered, heavy as storm clouds on the horizon. The first came as drought. The last spring rain faded away, and the sky turned mercilessly dry. Harsh sunlight scorched the young shoots just breaking through the soil. The ground hardened, splitting open like wounds. You and your father stood in the field, staring at rows of withering plants. He was silent for a long time, then sighed hoarsely. "If the heavens show no mercy, all the labor of the village will turn to dust." His words cut deep into your heart. Your mother tried hauling water from the well, but the water level had sunk so low that the bucket scraped only shallow scoops. The little water poured onto the soil vanished in moments, never reaching the roots. In the village, laughter fell silent. People gathered at the church, praying day and night. The priest raised the cross high, pleading for rain. Voices of song rose with the wind, yet the sky remained a relentless blue, cloudless. On some days the villagers held processions through the fields, kneeling and pressing their faces to the earth in supplication. Children sobbed with exhaustion, the elderly collapsed, trembling, but no one dared stop. So long as they prayed, there was still a chance. You knelt among them, heart heavy, eyes fixed on the heavens, begging for even a single drop of rain. While the crops thirsted, the livestock began to fail. Cattle that once stood strong now staggered on gaunt legs. One afternoon a terrible bellow rang out. You rushed to the barn and found a cow collapsed, its body shuddering. Villagers came running, some burned herbs for smoke, others rubbed ashes on its hide, others prayed aloud. But days later the cow died, leaving its calf wailing until its voice broke. The news spread quickly. Disease had begun to sweep through the herds. One by one, families lost their animals and cries of grief echoed across the village. Your mother held 2 goat kids after their mother perished, trying to feed them thin milk. You sat beside her, dripping each drop carefully into their mouths, but they were too frail, fading after only days. Your father sat in silence, eyes vacant. To lose livestock was not only to lose milk and meat, but the very power to till the land. Their deaths struck the village like a hammer blow, leaving it wrapped in mourning. As villagers fought drought and sickness, the Lord's soldiers arrived. They rode in on horses, armor gleaming, carrying rolls of parchment listing the season's taxes. No one could resist. They went house to house, counting grain, demanding silver, and when there was none, they forced men into labor. Your father, frail and thin, still surrendered the precious sack of seed he had saved. You watched him tremble as he set it at the soldier's feet, eyes clouded as though giving away his own flesh. Some villagers had nothing left. They were bound and dragged away to build the Lord's walls. Their families' screams tore the air, but no one dared intervene. Worse still, rumors spread of raiders roaming the land, bands armed with blades, pillaging small villages. Fear swept through your people. Each night the men kept watch. Your name too was called. With a wooden staff in hand, you stood trembling by the gate. Darkness pressed close, an owl's hoot, rustling leaves, each sound stabbed your nerves. Every gust of wind felt like a lurking shadow. One night, a crash in the forest sent the whole village rushing with torches, only to find a stray dog. But the fear remained. Everyone knew if raiders truly came, the village could not stand. In those days, you felt yourself change. No longer just a child of fear, you learned to grip hoe and staff, to guard each field and each animal. Your hands grew calloused, your gaze hardened, but inside a small fire still burned. The belief that survival meant tomorrow was still possible. Your father looked at you with both worry and pride. Each night your mother stroked your hair, whispering prayers that life's cruelty would not break you. Through it all, the church became a refuge of spirit. Villagers gathered there, lighting candles, singing, praying. Flickering light touched weary faces, kindling fragile but steady faith. You knelt, hands clasped, listening to voices rise in prayer. Outside waited darkness, disease, hunger, and human threat. But in that moment, a strange calm returned. Faith was only a slender thread, but by it people found the strength to rise again, to keep walking the thorny road. Time crawled on. The drought did not end. Disease still haunted, taxes still crushed, and the threat of raiders lingered. Yet within hardship, you and the villagers grew harder, learned to guard one another, to cling to hope, however faint. You came to see that in this age, to live one more day, to witness one more dawn, that alone was a gift. And in your heart, amid every trial, a quiet faith smouldered, that rain would return, the fields would live again, and perhaps, if only for a moment, peace would be found. After the long days when it seemed as though darkness had covered everything, a small but vital change began to appear. Thin grey clouds slowly gathered in the sky, the air grew damp, and one afternoon, as you sat by the parched field, a drop of water suddenly fell onto your hand. At first you thought it was only dew, but then a second drop, a third, followed. Looking up, you saw the whole sky darkening, and then the rain poured down. The first rain after so many months of drought brought the village back to life. Children rushed out into the road, barefoot, dancing in the rain, laughing aloud. The adults lifted their faces to the sky, arms wide to catch the cool drops. Your mother sobbed, her hands trembling as though she were holding a divine gift. Your father stood silently, eyes blurred with tears, but a rare smile spread across his lips. Rain fell on thatched roofs, into cisterns, and streamed across the thirsty fields. The cracked earth slowly absorbed the water, softening like a body revived. After that rain, green sprouts returned to the fields, each tender leaf trembling in the wind. Villagers hurried to the land, checking every row, tilling the soil again, building ridges to hold water. No one complained, only words of gratitude filled the air. The priest held a thanksgiving ceremony, the entire village kneeling in the wet mud, voices rising in song, mingling with the sound of raindrops pattering on the roof tiles. Though disease still lingered, though taxes were still heavy, water meant the crops had a chance. And within every heart, hope began to grow like a small flame fed by the wind. Not only nature but people too began to change. After so much loss, everyone grew closer. One family shared a handful of leftover seeds with another. Neighbors helped repair leaky roofs, and the men took turns standing guard at night to protect the village. Even in hardship, the spirit of community became a strength. You no longer felt alone, but part of a whole, where everyone relied on each other to live. Your father began to teach you more about farming, how to recognize fertile soil, how to watch the sky to predict rain and sun, how to care for weak livestock so they would not collapse. He taught not just with words, but with his calloused hands, with patience and determination. Each time you erred, he did not scold, but gently corrected. In his eyes you saw expectation. The next generation must carry the burden, must not fall. Your mother was gentle but stronger than ever. Though weary, she still rose early to cook thin porridge, mend torn clothes, comfort children crying from hunger. Some days she secretly gave you her share, saying she had already eaten. You knew she lied, but said nothing, only swallowed your tears and promised yourself you would work harder to repay her. Then summer came, but this time not with endless drought. Rain returned more steadily, sometimes harsh, but the earth had water, the plants had strength, and hope grew in each young stalk of grain. People began to talk about harvest, about saving seeds for the next year. In those talks, laughter reappeared, brief but precious. You too had changed. No longer just a child trembling at the night. You knew how to wield a hoe, to watch over cattle, to guard with the men. Your hands bled when the hoe struck stone. Your shoulders ached after hauling water, yet in your heart was pride. You were helping preserve the life of your family and your village. One night, standing guard with your father, you heard the frogs croaking across the fields. He smiled faintly. The sound of frogs means the harvest will be green and full. That simple sentence warmed you. In the darkness, under the stars, you realized hope was not distant, but perseverance itself. Each day endured to survive. This new hope came not only from nature, but from people. Couples began to pledge to each other. Newborns cried their first cries. The elders, though frail, retold old stories to sustain the young. You listened to those tales of years of famine endured, of golden harvests that once filled the barns, and you believed your village would see such days again. The trials had not vanished, taxes still weighed, disease still claimed animals, raiders still lurked. But amidst it all, you and the villagers had learned not to collapse, had found small candles burning in the dark. Hope, however fragile, was the one thing that carried people through the night. And so the days passed, fields grew green again. Birds sang above and in every heart. a simple dream began to form, a dream of a bountiful harvest, of a winter without hunger and cold, of a life still harsh, but always with sparks of light to guide the way. Summer seemed to pass in peace, but when the fields began to turn golden with ripening grain, when the village was preparing for harvest, dark clouds gathered once more, heralding a new trial. No one expected that hope, barely rekindled, would so soon have to face another darkness, colder and heavier than before. The rain that had once brought life became relentless, unyielding. Water flooded the fields, drowning the stalks heavy with milk. Dirt paths turned into slippery bogs, streams carried mud, debris, and weakened livestock away. The gentle brook now roared, sweeping aside anything in its path. Within days, the once tranquil countryside became a dismal painting, the smell of dampness seeping into every corner. Your father stood gazing at the submerged fields, his eyes bloodshot, lips pressed tight, his hands clenched, as though trying to hold on to faith slipping beyond reach. Your mother clutched the last sack of dry seeds, setting it carefully in the loft above the hearth to keep it from rot. For she knew if those spoiled, the family's hope for the next year would vanish. Then sickness followed the flood. Rats bred in the damp shadows, invading homes to gnaw at the little food left. Livestock grew ill and died within days of coughing and weakness. Soon villagers themselves fell ill, high fevers, red rashes spreading across skin. Wails echoed from many houses, announcing that the dream of a bountiful harvest had dissolved into illusion. And not only nature, but human greed struck too. Bands of raiders from afar descended, exploiting the village's exhaustion. One night, while most slept after a day's battle with floodwaters, shouts erupted. Torches flared, hooves thundered, steel clashed with a chilling ring. The raiders stormed in, seizing the remaining sacks of grain, driving away gaunt cattle. Villagers rose in desperate defense, armed only with sticks. You saw your father charge into the dark, swinging his club, his cries mingling with the hiss of steel. At last the raiders withdrew, leaving ash and bleeding wounds behind. Flames had consumed several thatched cottages, and on the wet earth lay bodies that would never rise again. The villagers gathered beside their dead, too drained to weep, staring at one another in mute despair. Yet the blows kept coming. A decree arrived from the Lord's castle. This year, despite famine, taxes must be paid in full, indeed, raised higher to cover war expenses for some distant conflict. The soldier who bore the order rode through the village with cold eyes, unmoved by suffering. The peasants lowered their heads, powerless. Defiance meant death. Fear thickened, blanketing the village. Children's laughter vanished, replaced by coughs and dragging steps. At night, silence reigned, broken only by dripping rain and the mournful call of owls. You lay on damp straw listening to your parents' labored breaths, heart twisted with pain. Hope, once kindled, now flickered like a candle caught in the wind on the edge of extinction. Yet even in that darkness small lights glimmered. Elders gathered herbs, preparing remedies to tend the sick. Families shared what little food they had, knowing if one fell, all would weaken. The priest held long night vigils, candles trembling, illuminating weary but steadfast faces. You too had changed. No longer merely a boy cowering at shadows, you now stood guard with the men, helped your mother dry damp grain, and supported fevered neighbors to the healer's hut. Fear remained, but beneath it, a quiet strength had begun to grow. Whenever you looked at the gloomy sky, you wondered if tomorrow would differ from today. But you remembered your father's words on a dark night. Hope is not waiting for miracles. It is choosing each day to live, even if only by breath. You clung to that truth as a small lamp against the void. The village stumbled on like shadows drifting through sorrow. Yet step by step they refused to collapse. And deep within everyone believed that one day the sun would shine again, and the darkness, no matter how thick, could not last forever. In the days following that calamity, the whole village seemed submerged in an invisible fog of gloom. Though the sun still rose each morning, its light was veiled by heavy grey clouds, as if even nature conspired with fate's cruelty. Villagers moved silently, speaking less than ever, their eyes etched deep with worry and weariness. Even the children, once so full of laughter, now only huddled by the hearth, their tiny hands stretched toward the flickering flame, their eyes hollow, staring into the distance. You began to notice strange sounds in your dreams. At first, they were no more than whispers, like wind slipping through cracks, but soon they grew clearer, like someone calling your name from the shadows. When you woke, your heart pounded, sweat cold upon your skin. Yet, mingled with fear was something else, hard to name, a sense that the whispers were not threats but reminders, perhaps even guidance. You dared not tell your parents, but inside you nurtured a fear intertwined with curiosity. One night, while you kept watch with your father at the forest's edge, the wind stirred eerie voices through the brittle trees. Suddenly you heard a faint murmur. "Do not give up. Everything has only just begun." Startled, you turned to your father, but he only stared silently at the sky, as if he heard nothing. You bit your lip, holding those words within. In the days that followed, you heard the whispers again, at the fields, by the well, even as you carried water. They came and went, sometimes near, sometimes far, like the breath of the earth itself. At times they spoke of trials, at others of hope. They chilled you yet compelled you. Gradually you began to think fate itself was speaking to you, sending messages to prepare you for what lay ahead. Meanwhile, the village continued to struggle. The sickness lingered, the floods threatened, and the tax collectors returned once more, stripping away the meagre sacks of grain that remained. Despair spread. Many collapsed. Yet in the darkness you noticed a quiet change. Those who endured began to share more, to help each other, knowing only unity could keep them alive. One night an elder known for his tales summoned you. In his dim hut, lit only by a wavering oil lamp, he whispered of prophetic dreams, of children born to hear the voice of fate and guide their people. You shivered, but his eyes carried a grave conviction. When the darkness covers all, the voice within you will show the path. Do not fear, it is the truth fate has chosen to give you. From that night onward, you no longer dreaded the whispers. Instead, you listened closely. Each time you tried to remember them and realized that though unclear, they always urged perseverance, always reminded you not to surrender. They became like a lantern within, a steady light in your mind, giving you faith that even in thickest darkness there was still a road ahead. On a night of storm, when the village trembled in the howling wind, you heard the clearest whisper yet. Rise, lead, protect, not only for yourself, but for all. This time you did not tremble. You stepped outside into the rain, lifted your face to the cold drops, and felt within you a strange fire, the sense that fate had placed both a burden and an honor upon your shoulders. The next morning, as sunlight broke after the storm, you told your parents about the whispers. Your father regarded you for a long time, stern eyes softened by pride. He placed his hand on your shoulder, saying quietly, "Perhaps you have been chosen. Be strong, for you live not only for yourself, but for all who depend on you." From that moment, you changed. No longer a child shrinking from the night, you became someone who listened, who observed, who carried weight. You aided the villagers more, encouraged the hopeless, and joined the other youths in keeping night watch. Every small act was guided by those whispers in your heart, like a compass pointing true. And soon the villagers too looked at you differently, no longer as a child but as someone slowly becoming a pillar. In their eyes you saw both expectation and trust. You knew the road ahead would be fraught with hardship, but with the whispers within, you believed you would never allow the darkness to swallow everything. This morning's light was gentler than ever before. After long months beneath heavy clouds, the sun finally broke through, spilling golden rays across every dew-laden blade of grass. Birds sang, their voices weaving with the crow of roosters, and for a rare moment, peace returned. You stepped outside, drew a deep breath, and within you stirred a new conviction. The darkness had tested you, but it had also tempered you. The whisper from last night's dream still echoed in your mind. It had said, "No road is strewn with roses, but each step you take will become a path for others to follow." You awoke with a certainty you had never felt before, that you were not meant merely to survive, but to lead, to kindle light for those who wandered lost. The village still bore its scars. Houses stood half-burned, their walls black with smoke. Fields carried the marks of floodwaters. Yet within the people a flame of hope was growing. Children once more played in the grass. Though their bodies were thin, laughter rang out again. Adults bent over the soil, sowing seeds with faith that the next harvest would bring sustenance. You walked the fields with your father, where green shoots had begun pushing through after the storms. He glanced at you and gave a slight nod. No words, only a look that told you he trusted you to carry forward. At home, your mother quietly prepared breakfast. Though it was just thin porridge, she added sprigs of fresh greens from the garden, a small sign of change, from despair toward the belief that tomorrow could hold more. The villagers gathered beneath the ancient tree at the center of the settlement. No one spoke of fear or failure. They spoke only of mending roofs, dividing the work of the fields, and setting watch against raiders' return. Many eyes turned toward you. They no longer saw a child, but someone they hoped could guide them, not because you were stronger, but because you had heard the whispers they could not. You rose, met their hollow yet determined faces, and spoke firmly. "We have endured suffering, yet we still live. While we live, we continue. Darkness cannot swallow us forever. We will press on for our children, for those who have fallen, for this very land." Your words were not grand, but they struck the hearts of all who listened. Some eyes grew wet, yet smiles broke through. For a moment silence lingered, then voices of agreement rose, swelling into a chorus of faith. From that day, you and the villagers began anew. They did more than plant crops. They learned to guard their food, to share seeds, to send scouts to other lands for trade. You joined every task, keeping watch at night, ploughing fields, patching roofs, rebuilding the dikes. And in each small act you heard the familiar whispers reminding you fate had not placed you here to fear, but to walk forward. The nights were still long, but the darkness no longer held terror. You knew a single candle could drive it away. And if each person carried a candle, then the village, the generation, the future itself would blaze as bright as day. By the fires, Glow, you looked out at the moonlit fields where new seeds had been sown. Deep within, you understood. The path ahead remained full of trials, yet it was open now. It was not only your path, but that of everyone of the generations yet to come. And when the night wind brushed past, the familiar whisper returned. You have begun to walk. The future belongs to those who do not give up. You smiled, closed your eyes, and let that voice carry you into sleep. A sleep no longer burdened by shadows, but filled with the radiance of faith. For at last you had stepped onto your own path, the very path fate had softly called by name.